Good evening, morning, YouTube, social media world. Again, it's Gordon Cossey coming to you as always from Little Northumberland County in southeastern Ontario, about an hour past Oshawa along the 401 heading east. And I normally start out these videos in that exact same fashion. Today's Wednesday, the 9th of February at 1:03 a.m. And, that I'm Gordon Cossey coming to you from Brighton, from Northumberland County, Ontario. But I want to give a little more perspective on who's this guy, some guy talking on YouTube, voicing his opinions into the social media vomitorium. And I realize that as a 55-year-old white guy, in our age of cancel culture and everything, some will automatically dismiss anything someone of my background has to say, because they'll say, well, you individuals such as yourself have controlled the room for too long. You should not have a voice. It's this cancel culture that we live in. I would like to live in a world where we operate on the currency of ideas, where ideas are debated and discussed. But unfortunately, in the world we live in now, it's challenging at best. And there's a tendency, he's a white guy from rural Ontario. Well, just to give some scope, I haven't lived my entire life in small town Eastern Ontario. I actually have lived all over Canada. I spent most of my years growing up in and around Toronto. I lived in the eastern burbs of Toronto, grew up out that way, lived in downtown Toronto, lived on Thorncliffe Park Drive, which that street in Thorncliffe Park Drive, East York, Ontario, that street probably has a larger population than the town I live in now. I used to live in a 25-story, 3-winged apartment building. Also lived in an apartment down on Cosburn Avenue. I've lived in North Bay. I've lived in Quebec City. Lived in Kingston, outskirts of Montreal. I spent 10 years growing up in the United States. Moved to New York City when I was less than a year old. And then later from New York City, gravitated to New Jersey and went to kindergarten through grade 4 there. Spent a year living in Portland, Oregon. Most of my time growing up has been living in larger urban centers or on the periphery in the suburbs of large urban centers like Toronto, Portland, Oregon, New York City, even Quebec City. It's a city of 500,000-600,000 people. And, I don't have what I consider to be a typically small town perspective. I consider myself to have not a pan-Canadian perspective, but more pan-Canadian than most. Not as much as some, though, obviously. So with all that being said, what I would ideally like to see is a discussion of ideas. And right now, what we're in a battle for public opinion. To give things some more perspective, when this pandemic was declared back in March of 2020, I was still serving in the Canadian Armed Forces. And I was going into work while many people were hunkering in their bunkers, sheltering in place, stay at home, stay safe. Others, myself included, and I don't want any kudos for it. I was thrilled to be able to go into work for my shifts, because it was such an enormous benefit to my mental health, to my well-being, to be able to get out and interact with people. And from that perspective, I was never worried about COVID from the get-go. And then being out and interacting with people, you start to realize, goodness, things don't seem as scary as the news is portraying, which is a perspective that those who had the privilege and the benefit of being able to work safely from home and only ever venturing out of their house to go to the grocery store or the drugstore, or only for strictly essential activities for maybe an hour or so each week, had a far more sheltered view. And I can tell you that amongst my colleagues, the fear over COVID, I have a large degree of empathy for the truckers, because like myself, like grocery store workers, like police, like paramedics, like hospital workers, like all so-called essential workers, which is a moniker that drives me crazy, because in my world, every person is essential, irrespective of what they do to earn a living. And to deem someone essential or not essential based on something as arbitrary as a job just cuts to my core. It's wrong. But at any rate, I have empathy toward the truckers, because like myself and like everyone else I just enumerated, going out, working, not hunkering in their bunkers, not, living in fear of the virus, and saw that, rightly or wrongly, decided of our own volition that many people said, geez, I don't think this is anything to really worry about. We're 2 years into this. I've mentioned it in a previous video. In the year 2020, you can go check the statistics. Canada experienced just over 300,000 deaths in the year 2020. That was what was forecast before COVID came along. Canada was projected to have 7.803 deaths per 1,000 of population in 2020 before COVID came along, according to UN actuarial tables. Look it up. If you want to debate it, if you want the link, ask. I'll post it in the comments. 7.803 on a population of 38 million comes somewhere in and around 296, 297,000. I'm not going to pull out my calculator again. It's in and around that figure. We had a little excess death. But when the pandemic started, we were told there were going to be 100,000 deaths directly due to COVID in the first year. There was nothing near. We saw the reports from Bob Cajun. I actually know individuals who went up to Bob Cajun and worked in that nursing home hospice, where the first ground zeros, as it were. Unfortunately, in Ontario, in Canada, populations who are living in congregate settings in long-term care and hospice and nursing homes, we're dealing with an incredibly weak, frail population, typically at the end of natural life expectancy. And when any virus tears through, it tears through. So the point I'm getting at is that there are deadly pathogens out there. There's influenzas. 8,511 Canadians died, according to Statistics Canada, in 2018 from influenza. Deadly virus, but we never cared. I guess those 8,511 people were expendable. We didn't destroy the lives of our children. We didn't destroy mental health of our children over influenza, because we accept that life has risks. Every time you walk outside your door, every time you get behind the wheel of your car and you drive on the deadly 401, you're at risk. People need to manage their own risk. And so what we have right now is we have a battle for public opinion. And now the tide is turning. It's taken a long time. Anyone who's followed me, followed my blog, which is called Canadian Soapbox, Gordy Canuck, blogspot.com. Canuck spelled C-A-N-U-K, not C-A-N-U-C-K, knows that going back to 2020, I was writing blog posts that, these lockdown restrictions are going to do more damage than COVID ever could. And I was not the only individual saying that. It was being said by reputable experts from all around the world. Dr. David Katz, who's the past president of the U.S. Centers for Lifestyle Medicine, was interviewed by Bill Maher, did an interview with him, and he did some other media outlets. So he had an op-ed piece published in the very progressive New York Times saying the cure is worse than the disease. And he was a front runner. Dr. Ioannidis with Stanford University. I believe he's one of the world's renowned experts in epidemiology. He came out early and said it. There were multitudes, but they were all suppressed. They were all censored. They were all shut down. So that narrative was not allowed to be shared, except by a Joe Schmo nobody like me, because I'm a fart in a hurricane. So after 2 years of people finally waking up to the fact that these measures don't work, and there's never been any real excess mortality, not in the first year of the pandemic. We still haven't gotten the 2021 numbers in yet. Of course, the difference being now, 2021, one would think, with the now widely available, that things should be better. It'll be interesting to see if that is in point of fact true or if things are worse. Could things be worse when everyone is, as opposed to when nobody was? We'll find out. But after 2 years, people have seen the damage that has been done to their children, the social disconnection, the interruption in their education, the damage to their mental health, the increases in teen suicide ideation. And sadly, it's not just ideation. This has been horrific. And the men and women who have been driving Canada's trucks, of all backgrounds, of all nationalities, who've been out on the front lines, keeping our grocery store shelves stocked, everything in your home, look around, it came on a truck 99% of the time. And we applauded them. We applauded them then. But now, some Canadians are so traumatized by fear that they want their rights to bodily autonomy taken away, which is something that goes directly against international law and our own Constitution and Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's abhorrent. And on top of that, we have a triple jabbed prime minister who has to go into isolation so that he doesn't infect people. Effective? The unfortunate thing is the pandemic measures, the mandates, have become almost like a soother to a large segment of the population. It's become their soother. And anyone who's been a parent of a young child and has given them a soother or a security blanket, God help you when you go to take that soother or that security blanket away, those children will scream, and you have to have endurance if you want to break them of the habit. Right now, we have the province of Saskatchewan, Scott Moe. We have the province of Alberta, Jason Kenney. They are signaling that they are bringing an end to mandates, to things like the passport. I believe that's coming to an end almost immediately in Alberta in terms of the passport. They're talking about an end to masks, and already there are overtures being made by groups like teachers who just they're having that soother taken away. Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to stand in front of a classroom full of children who don't have a mask on their face, who aren't sucking air through a piece of cloth. It's not safe. And scared, frightened people tend to control the room. They tend to scream loud. And so what I am going to suggest, not everyone can get to Ottawa. I can't get to Ottawa. And to be entirely honest, there's a part of me that doesn't want to go because that's not my makeup. That's not who I am. I'm not into protests. I don't like waving a stupid sign. It's theatrics. And I support it 100%. But at the same time, there are individuals attached to the movement, attached to the Freedom Convoy. And I'll throw out one name, someone with whom I'm not particularly fond. Pat, I think the name is Pat King, goes by the real Pat King, as if there's a fake Pat King out there somewhere. And then there's Chris Sky, and there are other individuals who I find abrasive. They don't speak. I agree with the stand they're taking, but not necessarily in the manner in which they're taking it. And there have been allegations against some individuals of harboring or having expressed white nationalist sentiment, which I have absolutely no use for, and denounce and decry at every possible opportunity. But in our world, guilt by association, we've all seen what's happened. One idiot walking around in Ottawa with a Confederate flag, and the media is on them like ants on sugar. They just, focus in just on that one specific moron. Same with anyone with I understand there were also one or two guys with swastikas. The evidence that I've seen of these individuals show them entirely clad in black with a full face ski mask on, so that you can't even identify them and call them out as individuals, which needs to happen. You don't see any of the coverage from our mainstream legacy media. You don't see any coverage of all the Sikh drivers who are there. Canada has a large number of Sikh truck drivers, and God bless them. But the media is not going to cover that, because the media is framing a narrative. They are beholden to our federal government. The federal government pays them, I believe the figure is $350 million a year. And are you going to bite the hand that feeds you? During I think it was 2018 or 19, they have an annual event in Ottawa called the Press Gallery Dinner. In Ottawa, they have the balcony around the House of Commons, and one portion of it is deemed the press gallery, and that's where members of the Canadian press will go to cover the goings on in our House of Commons. And then they host every year a gala dinner, the Ottawa Press Gallery Dinner, and I think it was 2019. And it's a self-deprecating humor. Sometimes there's a lot of truth in humor. Now, Trudeau got up there, and his little bit of self-deprecating humor was that, people accuse the media of giving us softball coverage for no good reason. But there's a very good reason. We pay them $600 million. He used the figure 600 million. I thought it was 350 a year. Maybe it was, over the previous 2 years, whatever the case. So we pay them 600 million. Then he made the point that you don't get stellar headlines like these without greasing the wheels. And then on the video board behind him, he showed a few scathing headline bylines, saying that Trudeau must resign, et cetera, as if to say, here, I found three headlines that have the mainstream legacy media criticizing my government. Hence, that means that the journalism is balanced. And I dispute that. I don't believe that. I do believe they pay lip service to presenting a balanced view. But certainly in terms of this convoy and the pejorative manner in which they've been reporting it has been disgusting. I've talked about it before, referring to 2 or 3 individuals climbing up on the war memorial and referring to that as a desecration is the most loaded term imaginable for someone who just climbed up on a monument. Accurate reporting, fair, balanced reporting would be to say something simply along the lines of, and while at the protest, 3 or 4 or 5, whatever number, a small number of individuals were found to be climbing on the war memorial. But that wouldn't carry the emotional weight that saying protesters have been desecrating the war memorial and the statue of Terry Fox. Someone tied a Canadian flag to the statue, and they called that desecration. That's garbage journalism. That's not fair reporting. I'm finding it ironic that what is happening now, it's being widely reported that Ottawa police, and even I believe in Alberta, they're having the same difficulty at their border crossing. The police and the authorities are trying to engage towing companies with whom they have standard contracts or pre-tendered contracts. They're trying to engage them to come and have the trucks removed with the tow truck drivers because they are beholden to the operators of large rigs. They're not complying. The tow truck drivers are refusing to bite the hand that feeds them. In much the same way, I would suggest that the mainstream legacy media in this country does not engage in fair reporting of what is going on in Ottawa in order to not bite the hand that feeds them. Government largesse, taxpayer dollars flowing into them. So what I'm going to suggest is if you cannot get to Ottawa, or if you're not inclined to go to Ottawa, but you support what this stands for, restoration of the Constitution as the highest law of the land in Canada, as opposed to an emergency mandate, that you need to get in touch with your MP. That's federal. Or with your MPP or MLA. Si vous êtes dans la province du Québec, votre membre de l'Assemblée nationale, and let them know, because I promise you, especially in provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan, and I hear that there are overtures as well in Quebec happening about ending the mandates. You know that the nervous Nellies are going to scream because their security blanket and their soothers being taken away. And so those of us who want the measures repealed need to be just as we need to make our voices heard. An analogy I would use, it's a little simplistic, but I think it speaks to the point very well. Going all the way back to Dr. Seuss, to my youth, and the book Horton Hears a Who. You'll remember that there's that little fluff ball that housed a world full of people, who's. And Horton, with his big elephant ears, could hear them. And so he protected this little fuzzball, but everyone wanted it boiled. They thought that Horton was crazy, and they wanted him to boil this world of people in a boiling pot. And so Horton exhorted all the people of this Whoville to scream at the top of their lungs to make their voices heard. And so they all banged their drums and screamed and yelled. But it wasn't loud enough. It wasn't loud enough. And the mayor of Whoville went all around trying to making sure everyone was doing all that could be done. And he found the smallest little who. I forget the name of I think it was a little girl. And she was being quiet. And the mayor exhorted her, we need your voice. We need your voice. And so finally she let out an eep. And that was what broke through. And then all the other animals who were threatening to boil, everyone heard it. It's a bit of a simplistic metaphor, but I think it speaks to the point that if you want to see a restoration of the Constitution, of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, if you want to have the right to bodily autonomy in this country, if you want the right to cross interprovincial barriers in this country, if you want to go province to province without having to show your papers, well, then you need to get loud. You need to call your MP, your MPP, your MLA, even let your local city councilors know, your mayors. Let every aspect of government know. Don't be shy around your friends and family. Frightened individuals, and again, another metaphor, the 2-year-old with their security blanket. They're going to scream and they're going to yell. And they're going to try and cancel you. You need everyone of every background, every age, race, religion, orientation, doesn't matter. You need every voice who does not want to live in a country that operates under the dictates of Al Jolson, who ran out of the House of Commons today when being questioned by a member from Foothills. I'm assuming that's a riding in Alberta. John Barlow took him to task over his divisive, hateful language that he's using to divide. Trudeau's playing classic politics in a situation that should be about human rights. And human rights are for everybody. But instead he's playing politics, trying to pit one group of Canadians against another group of Canadians, against the un. He wants us fighting against each other. I have no animosity whatsoever towards anyone who's decided to. It's your choice. I respect that choice. I would expect that respect to be reciprocated. I would expect it, but I don't anticipate it with some individuals. It's an unrealistic expectation. What are you going to do? It's an imperfect world. So, I talked about the fact that, we now have had, I'm going to bring up a name, and it's a bit of a polarizing name because some individuals don't like this person, Art Pawlowski. I've never met him. I've met a number of the pastors in Canada who are standing up to this. I've met Jacob Riom in Kitchener-Waterloo. I've done podcasts with Aaron Rock out in Windsor. I've been to Henry Hildebrandt's church in Aylmer, Ontario. I've been to churches up in Peterborough and Napanee, where congregations meet like it's 2019, almost. You can't entirely say it's like 2019. There's still the shadow, but in terms of worship, congregating, there's handshaking, there's hugging, there's joy, there's giving praise where it's due, not to our politicians. Our freedoms do not originate from man. Our freedoms come from God. In the preamble to Canada's Constitution, it says, whereas Canada is founded on as a nation that recognizes the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Those two things go hand in hand. You take God out of the equation, then there is no longer a fixed standard. There's no longer an objective truth. Everything becomes subjective. And Prime Minister Al Jolson can operate on a whim. Truth can change day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. We have a constitution. We have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We need to get back to the basics. So I talked about John Barlow, how he chased Justin Trudeau, went crying out of It's an editorial comment on my part. There wasn't on camera, but it was noted on the parliamentary CPAC channel that while being questioned, Justin Trudeau left the House of Commons. I think he went to fill out a hurt feelings report. If you can't get to Ottawa, or if you don't want to go, fully understandable. But get in touch with your MP, your MPP, your MLA. Write them, phone them, go knock on their door if that's feasible. The battle for public opinion. We can't let up. We've got Alberta on our side. We've got Saskatchewan on our side. I failed to mention one of the Liberal MPs just broke ranks with the caucus, and that's significant because there is something within Canada's parliamentary democracy referred to as party discipline. Each party has a whip, and the whip job is to keep solidarity within the party. And a gentleman by the name of Joel Lightbound has broken ranks and has admonished his own leader of his own party and his own party for their handling of the pandemic and for the divisive manner in which the Prime Minister has been acting with hateful, divisive rhetoric. And I was talking about Art Pawlowski. Art Pawlowski is now back in jail. This is the fifth time. Sorry, this is 5 Canadian pastors who have been jailed for the heinous crime of conducting religious worship, something which is enshrined as a right within our Constitution, which under the guise of undemocratic mandates has been stripped. We need it back. You're not a Christian? Nope. It's going to sound strange coming from a Christian saying I have no issue with that. I do, but ultimately, religion is a choice. And if one chooses, it's a right accorded by a constitution. If you take away the rights of one individual, you take away the rights of all individuals. What you do to the least among you, you do to me. When Omar Khadr had his constitutionally guaranteed rights abrogated by successive Canadian governments, going back to Chrétien, then Martin, then Stephen Harper, three consecutive prime ministers just passed the ball, and they did not respect, they abrogated Omar Khadr's constitutionally protected rights. And as a result of that, Justin Trudeau correctly opted to settle a court case that Omar Khadr was bringing against the government for their failure to protect him, for the failure to hold up his constitutionally guaranteed rights. The Canadian government paid Omar Khadr a little over $10 million. And if it had gone to court, if it had not been settled, we would have lost. I forget the amount he was suing for. I believe it was 15 or 20 million. And I have little doubt in my non-expert legal opinion, but everything I read on the matter, he would have won. Slam dunk. There was no question his rights were abrogated. Canadian has rights. And yet Trudeau stood up for the rights of Omar Khadr, even when it was inconvenient. And at the time, I applauded him for it, and I still applaud that action. Because as I say, what you do to the least, you can do to me. But now what we have is he protected the rights of one individual while he's abrogating the rights of everyone. And if you don't feel your rights have been abrogated, if you're so frightened, fair enough. But the tide is turning. There are pathogens everywhere in this world. There are influenzas, streptococcus, staph infections, bacterial infections. gastrointestinal. Germs are everywhere. And the one thing is build up your immune system, because even if SARS-CoV-2 disappears tomorrow magically, I would be extremely surprised to find out that the world all of a sudden became completely eradicated of every single virus, bacterial, and pathogen in existence, and that we all started to live forever. We all suffer from a terminal illness called life. The mortality rate is 100%. I've prattled on long enough, but get in touch with your elected representatives, provincially, federally, locally. Make phone calls, write emails. If it's feasible to, meet up with them face to face, respectfully, but let them know that you are on side. There are some scary things happening in Ottawa right now. There is talk, and this is in the mainstream press, that the officials are talking. A lot of the truckers brought their families down. They have, I don't know what everyone knows about truckers. I don't know a whole heck of a lot, but I do know that their cabs have the sleepers back there can be quite extensive. It's almost like a small bedroom. You can get a queen size bed in there, I think, and maybe even a bunk bed. And there are families camping out there because there are truckers who don't want to see their children growing up in a country, whereas they have to show their papers if they want to go from Ontario to Manitoba, which the government is talking about. And we need to say enough. So I'll leave you with that. God bless everyone. Get on the phone, get on the internet, find out how to get in touch with these people. The resources are all there. And if you have any comments, you're more than welcome. If you want to give me a thumbs up, woohoo, I live for it. I get the little endorphin, little serotonin or whatever, that little chemical in the brain that goes off when you get a like or an engagement. Yes, it does happen. I think it happens to everyone. So I'll leave you at that. Have a good night.